the news media, the most important part of his life was his last 3 years when he feuded with Donald Trump. I wonder why they're doing that. And there was little love lost. We know that between Trump and the late senator. But a simple question, is now the time to constantly invoke a political feud? Joining me with their takes, Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary for President George W. Bush, Monica Crowley from the London Center for Policy Research, and Juan Williams, co-host of The Five. Juan, what do you see happening here? There's been a kind of a nonstop series of complaints about how President Trump first tweeted about it. The statement wasn't long enough, the way the flag was lowered and then should have stayed lowered, then it was lowered again. And to me, it seems like a lot of this is getting away from John McCain, the man, and back to criticizing Trump, the president. Your reaction?
Well, I agree. I think that you have to honor John McCain, the man, especially now, as we go into this season of grieving and pay our respects to him and to his family. He truly was an American patriot, I think almost the definition in our generation, Laura. But I disagree with you about the media. I don't think the media is the one that refused to issue the statement at the recommendation of the chief of staff, the press secretary. I don't think it's the press that lowered the flag just temporarily and put it back up today before then changing course. I don't think it's the press that's been out there taking shots at John McCain. I think that's Donald Trump.
Well, you know, the current code for lowering the flag, it's been a tradition that it's lowered for the day of and the day after the passing of a member of Congress. In some recent years, it's lasted for several days. But it's not like Trump did something that's completely out of the ordinary. I mean, I probably would have just kept it lowered for till he was, actually buried. That's fine.
The American Legion said the same thing.
That's fine. But again, to turn this, Ari Fleischer, into, well, McCain was this type of man, and Donald Trump is this other type of man, immoral, without a great sense of patriotism, as he was not bipartisan, et cetera, et cetera. You get the sense that these political types are salivating over the opportunity to use a death to hit Trump. Am I misreading this?
No, Laura, you nailed it. And let me just stipulate, John McCain and Donald Trump did not get along. And that's the way two grown-up politicians can act toward each other. John McCain didn't want Donald Trump to come to his funeral. Donald Trump can return the favor by being dismissive if he wants. But the press, as they cover this, is very situational. They cover you depending on what situation you find yourself in. So in 2000, they loved John McCain because he was running against George Bush. In 2008, when John McCain ran against Barack Obama, they didn't really love him anymore. They loved him when he took positions against Republicans after he lost the presidential race, and then they didn't love him anymore when he was for the surge. Now, of course, that he's in a spat with Donald Trump, they love him again. This is how the press covers these things, and it's really just to stir a pot. It's not to shine an eternal light on the truth.
Monica, I remember back in 2010 when John McCain was running for re-election to the Senate. He ran this campaign commercial about how we need to repair that dang fence. Remember, he got a huge amount of blowback from the media saying, whoa, where's the other John McCain? So again, back to Ari's point, the media took shot after shot after shot at McCain when he was McCain, the conservative, standing up for, the pro-life movement, or in this case, building the fence or the border structure. But now that McCain is the opponent of Trump, they use that as a convenient vehicle just days before his burial.
Yeah, the press has always been shameless, but in situations like this, you see it put in bold relief. I remember in the run-up to the 2008 election, I remember Democratic friends of mine in New York and elsewhere saying, oh, John McCain, he's a moderate, he's a centrist, he's the kind of Republican that I can get with. And then after the election, I said, well, did you vote for him? Well, of course not. And when it comes to the media, and this is the same media, so many of them, that professed to love the Maverick until he won the Republican nomination for president. Then they began to smear him with all kinds of abominable lies and attacks. So this is who they are, and we know that. I just hope, John McCain has a special place in my heart because I worked for President Nixon during the last years of his life. Nixon was the commander-in-chief that brought John McCain home after he was released. President Nixon had many wonderful things to say about Senator McCain and had enormous respect for him. I think we all share in that. I just hope that in the next days leading up to his funeral, that we don't go down the path of what happened with Paul Wellstone, who was a Democrat who died in office, who's U.S. Senator, very far left guy, and his funeral was turned into this partisan jamboree. I think in death we ought to eulogize these people, honor their service to the country, even when we disagree with them, but respect their memory.
Yeah. Well, I think, Juan, Mark Short said today, we don't have to play this soundbite, but he basically said, look, if Trump had been very sentimental toward McCain, they would have ridiculed Trump, saying, you guys didn't get along. Like, you're faking it now. You said this thing about a captured POW. Now you're trying to, lionize McCain, basically saying he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. Is there some of that going on with every move that Donald Trump makes? He just simply cannot win with this media.
Well, I don't think so. But, I mean, in fact, I think people try to make sure in the media that they are not in position to be criticized by Laura Ingraham. They go out of their way. To me, you got to go back to the idea that Trump, insulted the guy in a very critical moment and, in a way that says, you're not a hero because you got caught. And that just offended a lot of people, but it didn't stop Donald Trump from winning the nomination.
Right?
That's why I was going to say that to you. So, I mean, Republicans made a decision there. So I think that, ultimately this is about Donald Trump's behavior to a rival, and I just don't think it's admirable. I do not.
No. Well, no. Ari, I'll let you close it out. McCain, remember back in 2004, he joked about, like, he'd be number 2 to John Kerry on the ticket. Remember that? And Republicans went crazy. He was kind of joking. But the media loves it when a Republican praising Obama or praising Clinton. They love that. But when a Republican is a hardline conservative on issue or after issue, that's when they unload. So McCain is, obviously in death, a war hero, is getting an amazing send-off, and I think that's fantastic. But Trump's not going to be a phony here. He's not going to pretend that he and McCain were buddy-buddy. They weren't. Trump was tough on him, and I wouldn't have said what he said about the POW thing. But you got to say both of them were kind of honest in the end.
And the other part of this that just bothers me when you talk about the press coverage is, don't forget, in 2008, there were reporters at the Huffington Post, columnists, who wrote that McCain was a racist. And we heard that throughout the 2008 campaign. But, this is not about Donald Trump. As much as I think that the flag should have been at half-mast, let the two have their feud. It's going to the grave now. But this is not about Donald Trump. This is about John McCain's life. And that's who we should be talking about. That's what the media should be focused on. And I really don't think this is going to move Americans if Donald Trump doesn't behave the way you want him to. About John McCain. This is about John McCain's life, not Donald Trump's.
An amazing life, an amazing American patriotic experience. Thank you all for joining us tonight. But what happens, by the way, to a celebrity who refuses publicly to trash Trump? Tiger Woods is finding out the hard way.